So, good evening, sir. Good evening, one and all. So, today my topic is rapid diagnostic test in pediatric infectious diseases. So, overview. First, we will see a few slides about the introduction and what is the common principle applied in the rapid test and what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages, and a few clinical case scenarios, how we can proceed in a syndromic approach, and some conclusion. So what is RDT? So RDT is a rapid diagnostic test. In other words, it is also called as a point of care testing. So what is the point of care testing? So which is an investigation which is taken at the time of consultation. So at the bedside, mostly it is done at the bedside or in the patient side with instantly available results. You will get the results in 1 or 2 hours time. It streamlines the diagnostic process and it helps ensure the patients receive the most effective and efficient care. It makes rapid triage possible, and the usual platform has been lateral flow immunoassay. Now, recently, molecular techniques have come, which we can apply as a point of care testing. So, of late, now it is a COVID pandemic which is going on. So, if you apply the COVID rapid diagnostic test, if you see, it helps in diagnosis. For example, if you see a child with ILI, that is a acute respiratory symptom. So, we can triage them whether it is COVID related or non-COVID related. So, it helps in triaging the patients. So, we can isolate the patients more effectively. And if it is COVID, we are following the COVID protocol. And if it is a non-COVID illness, then we are going to evaluate the child further. So this is a point of care testing which is taken at the time of consultation with immediately available results, and it helps to diagnose a condition properly, which is helpful in making an effective treatment and helps in rapid triaging also. So this is a lateral flow technique. So what is the basic principle which is applied in lateral flow immunoassay is, so we are applying a blood sample here. So this is a blood sample. So it can be used to detect antigen or antibody. So this is called an analyte. For example, you take an antigen detection test. So the blood sample contains an antigen. So it is allowed to pour in a well and it traverses here. So here in an observant pad, we have an antibody to the so-called antigen. So this antibody, so this blue color is an antibody. So to make it visible, that is, it is always coated with a fluorescent. So this yellow color is a fluorescent. Here, this is coated with gold. So this is a gold nanoparticle, which is conjugated with an antibody. Here again, you have two lines. So this is a nitrocellulose membrane. So this, once you add the blood, if it contains the antigen, it is going to come here and it is going to mix with the antibody. So here you have a formation of antigen-antibody complex. How we are going to pick up it? Again, it traverses through the nitrocellular membrane. Here again, the same antibody here we have. So because these antibodies are IgM, acute antibodies are IgM, it is polyvalent in nature. So again, here it combines. See, here you have an antigen, here you have antibody, here it is a gold. Again, you have an antibody. So here antigen, antibody, again antibody. So this complex form, which is making you a clear colored line possible. So this is the principle of lateral immunoflow. But we have to make sure, but we have to make sure that the tube, whatever platform we are using, it is a correct. So for validation, we have to have a control line. For this control, we have an antibody here. What is this antibody? This antibody is an anti-antibody, anti-IgG to this antibody. So here, if there are no antibodies also, this will pick up this antibody. So here we have an antibody and anti-antibody to this antibody. So this will form a color line. This is a control line. This is how we interpret. So if the analyte contains antigen, here you have a two colored line. If the analyte has no antigen, only the control line is visible and you see a only single line. So this is the principle of most of the rapid test. So another now rapid diagnostic test what is commonly used as a molecular diagnosis. The common example is a TrueNAT or the GeneXpert, which we are applying for COVID-19, and also it is popularly used in the diagnosis of TB. So what is the advantage of this molecular diagnosis? So you are requesting for a test. So sample is collected on the bedside and on-site analysis, we are transporting it to the lab. If you are doing a molecular analysis, for example, you take a GeneXpert or a TrueNAT, you get the results within 2 to 3 hours time. So you see the time. So time we can get it quickly, and the results is again interpreted to the doctor and he makes a decision what to do about this result. So this is an advantage of applying a molecular diagnosis on the bedside. So on the other hand, if you transport the sample to the regular laboratory and you are proceeding with the regular investigation, for example, you take a culture, TB culture or some other investigations, it may take more than 24 hours. In that case, it is not used. It's not going to get, you are not going to get your results quickly. So this is an advantage of applying an appropriate molecular diagnosis. You get the results quickly and you are able to triage and you are able to further proceed. So these are the common platforms. Now we are applying for the rapid diagnostic test. So, rapid diagnostic test where it is commonly applied. So in the periphery where they are not able to get the proper gold standard test, then only rapid tests are widely used. So for the rapid test to be effective, WHO has applied some criteria that is called assured criteria. What do you mean by assured? A stands for affordable. It should be affordable to all. It should not be too much expensive, and S is it is sensitive. So I will come to what is sensitivity and specificity later. So S is sensitive. The other stands for specificity. The test should be sensitive and it should be also specific. U is it should be user friendly. There should not be too many procedures involved. For example, you take GeneXpert. It is a totally automated PCR. We have to collect the sample and you have to process it only for first sample only. Then you just load the sample. You get the results in 1 or 2 hours. So that should be user friendly. And it should be rapid and robust. You have to get the results immediately. And it should be equipment free. Equipment free in the sense that should not, it's easy to handle. It is easy to transport. It should be equipment free. And D is deliverable to the end users. So it should be applicable in day-to-day practice. So if these criteria are met only, then we can say it is a very good rapid test. So this assured criteria we should know. So there are so many gold standard tests for each and every organism, but still sometimes you need a rapid test. So what is the need for the rapid test? So rapid test has become an integral tool for ASP. ASP is Antimicrobial Stewardship Program. So the Antimicrobial Stewardship Program, what is the aim of the ASP program? It aims to optimize the microbial therapy while reducing the risk of adverse events. For example, you see a child with a pharyngotonsillitis. You make a rapid diagnosis, clinical diagnosis of group A beta hemolytic streptococcus. But bedside, it is very difficult to differentiate from viral from this group A streptococcus. But if you do a RADT and if you prove it is group A beta hemolytic streptococcus, we know all the streptococcus are universally sensitive to penicillin. So we need not go beyond penicillin. You give appropriate therapy and appropriate duration. So that is an aim of antimicrobial stewardship program. So the RADT helps in maintaining the antimicrobial stewardship program effectively. So rapid phenotypic susceptibility testing for early PK is pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic optimization. Here you take the example of GeneXpert. So here, apart from MTB detected, so apart from diagnosing it as tuberculosis, we get the result. The other important result is whether it is rifampicin sensitive or rifampicin resistant. If it is rifampicin sensitive, we are always going to start the first line ATT straight away. If it is rifampicin resistant, then we are proceeding to the next step accordingly. So it helps in optimizing PK/PD principles. So the commonly we have RADT, for example, we have a BioFire FilmArray multiplex PCR for respiratory pathogen, CNS pathogen, and gastrointestinal pathogen, and should be applied appropriately in the correct clinical scenarios. So early identification of highly transmissible illness allows to rapidly isolate the patients, and it helps in the limit in the spread of disease. The typical example is COVID-19. We are triaging them in the fever surveillance area. If COVID is positive, we are isolating them, and this helps in spread of disease to the other patients. So these are the need for rapid tests. So it is a part of antimicrobial stewardship program, optimize PK/PD, and to limit the transmission of highly infectious diseases. So these are the rapid tests available here. So FilmArray. So this is a multiplex PCR. If you see the respiratory panel, it includes 18 viruses and 4 bacteria. So the blood culture panel, still we are not yet started using. GI panel, it covers viruses, bacteria, and even parasites are also will be covered. And ME panel, that is a meningoencephalitic panel. It covers viruses, bacteria, and yeast. And the pneumonia panel, it covers bacteria. And sometimes we are able to get the gene resistance. For example, MECA gene. If it is a staphylococcus and MECA gene is isolated, then we can know it is a methicillin sensitive staphylococcus or it is a methicillin resistant staphylococcus aureus. In that gene level, now we are able to pick up the resistance mutation. So how this rapid tests are utilized? So based on the response of the respondents, how they are using. So they say the rapid test has a maximum impact on the isolation facility use. The typical example is COVID-19. We are using mainly, so why we need to diagnose COVID-19? Mainly for the isolation purpose. If the child comes with fever, mild respiratory symptoms, if you tell them it's probable COVID, they may not be able to adhere to the isolation principle correctly. But if you prove it is COVID-19, definitely will be more useful in isolating them effectively. So the most important use of the rapid test is impact on isolation facility. The next most common impact is impact on the stewardship program, as I already told you. So it becomes an integral part of antimicrobial stewardship program. So other effect, it has an impact, little impact on mortality. So further molecular diagnosis. Now we have the gene testing for carbapenem resistance also. You know the mechanism and you can adjust the drugs accordingly. So it has an impact on mortality also and compliance with advice. So if you through the test, if you tell them, the patients will be more compliant with whatever you are following. So it helps in following the child and impact on escalation and de-escalation. Okay, so you see a child with meningoencephalitis, then you see send a meningoencephalitic panel, multiplex PCR, and you pick up a HSV infection. Then we are able to stop the antibiotics. We are able to stop antibiotics and we are able to continue only the acyclovir. So it has a significant impact on escalation and de-escalation and impact on length of stay. So based on whatever we are diagnosing, it is able to cut down the duration of hospital stay. So these are some of the advantages of rapid diagnostic testing. So there are some disadvantages also. So most of the tests, for example, this ME panel and biopsy respiratory panel, so these are more expensive, but and robust evidence for clinical benefit can be lacking. So for example, you pick up an RSV, but sometimes most of the infections like mycoplasma can be in the respiratory tract for so many months. So by doing only the this rapid test, we are not very sure that is only responsible for the clinical scenario. So this is one disadvantage. The other disadvantage is sensitivity and specificity may be lower than the established gold standard test. You take an example, typhoid. We know typhoid blood culture is a gold standard test. On the other hand, the other rapid tests like typhoid, IgM, they have lesser sensitivity and specificity. So we know when to apply this gold standard test in against the comparison with the when to apply this rapid test against the gold standard test. So other disadvantages for RDT, there is no one-size-fits-all model. Modeling of test and cost are widely different in widely different healthcare system. So in our scenario, for example, in India, the most common pathogen for respiratory infections is different. On the other hand, the West, the viruses are going to be different. So we are just should not copy whatever they are following. It has to follow our own epidemiology. The other example is you take the COVID-19 antigen testing. It is applicable only when the pre-test probability is high. For example, if there is an ongoing pandemic, you just screen them, then only it can be used. If the cases are coming down, when the pre-test probability of the test being positive is very low, then in that scenario, we should not be using that test. So when you should do, what population you should apply, you should know. So this is how we have to interpret the results. So what is sensitivity? The ability of the test to correctly identify the patients with the disease. The test has to identify all the individuals with the disease. That is called sensitivity. So sensitivity, so that means what does it indirectly implies? If the test is negative, we should be able to rule out the disease. So that is a test with high sensitivity. So a sensitive test should be able to pick up all those who have the disease. And if it is negative, we should be able to rule out the disease. This is the meaning of sensitivity. And the specificity is able to correctly identify people without the disease. So what does it mean? If you are able to pick up all the people without the disease, if the test is positive means we should be able to rule in the disease. So this is the meaning of sensitivity and specificity. Usually all the screening tests should have a good sensitivity and all the diagnostic tests should have a good specificity. So this is the meaning of sensitivity and specificity. So before applying any rapid test, we should know what is the sensitivity and what is the specificity. So even for rapid diagnosis of typhoid, there are so many kits available and the sensitivity and specificity of each kit varies with the manufacturer. So ordering the test, we should know what is the sensitivity of the particular test, what we are ordering, and the specificity of the test, what we are ordering. Without knowing that, there is no point in ordering the test. So what is true positivity? The person has the disease and the test is positive. So there is no doubt. True negativity, person does not have the disease and the test is negative. So this is how we need to interpret each and every rapid test. So this is the basic principle of rapid diagnostic test. Now we go in some clinical scenarios. So whatever said and done, what is the first step in diagnosis? It is always history, history, history. Okay, so without proceeding with history, we cannot make a clinical diagnosis. For example, in a child with acute febrile illness, based on the history, we may be able to differentiate whether it is a viral or bacterial illness. Based on interfebrile period, how is the condition of the child? Any other family members are affected? What is the seasonality? If more than 2 mucosal surfaces are involved, it favors more towards viral rather than bacterial. So what is the current viral which is circulating in the community? For example, now we are seeing a lot of dengue. Then you think of dengue-like illness. That's how you need to proceed. We should not be just simply ordering the test. So the first step in the diagnosis is always history, supported by physical examination. Most of the times we admit the children with 5 to 6 days of fever with hepatosplenomegaly. The next day we'll be finding a small lesion under the genital region, behind the scrotum, behind the ear. So history and physical examination, this will complete 90% of our diagnosis. The rest only we need to supported by labs. No test can replace the history, physical examination, and clinical judgment. So first we will see some of the host biomarkers, how it is useful. Okay, so 2-year-old previously well child. This child had a fall while playing and was seen in the OPD with a history of 2 days of limp and fever. On examination, the child is not able to bear weight on the right leg, but there are no obvious external swelling. We don't know whether it is an osteomyelitis or simply unrelated fever. So the clinician is ordering some basic investigation. Here the total count is 15,400 with polymorph predominant, poly60, lymphocyte 26, E2, M2, hemoglobin 10.2, platelets are okay. CRP is 292. So what is the interpretation of CRP? So usually CRP increases 4 to 6 hours after an inflammatory trigger and it peaks at 36 to 50 hours, that is 1.5 to 2 days, and levels decreases rapidly with the resolution of inflammation. A single value is neither sensitive nor specific enough to identify all the children with serious bacterial infection. However, a very high value does suggest a serious bacterial infection. Nowadays, we have to include MISC also if the child has very high CRP. So very high CRP, actually technically, I think it's more than 96 milligram per liter. So very high CRP does suggest a bacterial infection, and nowadays we have to think of MESI also. So routinely single value doesn't have any value, but some conditions will be serially monitoring the CRP. So serial monitoring of CRP will help in follow-up of infections like chronic infections like osteomyelitis and infective endocarditis, and start treatment, and you follow the child gradually clinically along with the CBC CRP. If the CRP levels doesn't fall or it is increasing after 48 hours of therapy, then it indicates a treatment failure or there is a complication evolving, or you have to revise your diagnosis. It could be a non-infectious etiology. And it can be a clue to an undrained abscesses and ongoing tissue necrosis. And apart from the positive predictive value, CRP has a high negative predictive value also. For example, in neonatal sepsis, 2 CRP measurements taken 24 hours apart, both the values are less than 10 milligram per liter, then we can reasonably exclude sepsis. So CRP should not be routinely ordered in primary care, and restricting the CRP testing to at-risk children based on their clinical presentation increases the diagnostic accuracy. This is how we can apply CRP. So the other important test we can use is the procalcitonin. So what is the main difference? So procal normal is less than 0.5 nanogram per ml. So compared to CRP, it rises too quickly and falls too rapidly. So it rises at 2 to 4 hours and peaks at 8 to 24 hours. So here half-life is 19 hours. Here its half-life is more or less the same, 22 to 26 hours. It has low specificity. On the other hand, it has high specificity. So what does the specificity means? If the PCT is less than 0.5, reasonably we are able to rule out bacterial infection. That is the meaning of high specificity. Sometimes CRP can be raised in certain viral infections. For example, typically certain viruses like adeno, CME, influenza viruses, they can have a high CRP. So only looking at the CRP, we should not come to a conclusion whether it is a viral or bacterial. Usually viral illnesses, PCT will be very low. So we made based on the first case, we made a probable diagnosis of osteomyelitis or septic arthritis, and this child underwent arthrotomy. The other most important test we have to order is a Gram stain. If you look at the Gram stain, here you have a Gram positive cocci in clusters. So this is mostly Staphylococcus. MSSA or MRSA, we have to wait for the results. So this is one example. So moving on to the next case scenario, we are seeing a 1 year, 6 months old child with high grade fever for 5 days duration. Systemic examination, we are not able to find any clue. Total counts, there is an extreme leukocytosis, that is 27,400 with polymorphs predominant. Hemoglobin and platelets are okay. So what are the causes of extreme leukocytosis? It can be UTI, it can be meningitis, or it could be pneumonia. So here there are no respiratory symptoms. So physician is ordering for a urine routine. So urine routine is showing 20 to 30 pustules, Le positive, nitrates positive, bacteria. How to interpret this urine routine? So what is leukocyte esterase? Leukocyte is WBC, so presence of pustules. Okay, so it has a sensitivity of 83% and specificity of 78%. And nitrates. So what is nitrate? So bacteria, if there is a bacteria, nitrates will be converted to nitrates. So this nitrate is picked up in the urine dipstick test. So if you see the nitrate test, the specificity is very good. So that means if nitrate is positive, the chance of this being UTI is very high. So nitrate has a specificity of 98%. So microscopy, that is WBC, pustules. So sensitivity 73%, specificity 81%. If you look at overall, so if you apply all the leukocyte esterase, nitrate, pustules, then your sensitivity increases to 89, and here specificity is 70%. So always you have to look at not only the WBC, so we have to look at the leukocyte esterase and nitrates before interpreting the urine routine reports. So next case scenario, we'll move on to pharyngotonsillitis. So I'll put two case scenarios. So this is the child. This is a 4-year-old child with bilateral exudates in the tonsil. Here one more case scenario. Okay, so here we have a, sorry. So this is one picture and this is one picture. Okay, so clinically it is very difficult to differentiate viral and bacterial. For that, usually we apply the modified McIsaac score. So what is McIsaac score? If there is a high grade fever, that is fever more than 100.4 degree, it is given a point. And tender anterior unilateral cervical adenopathy, then again it is allotted a point. Tonsillar swelling or exudate, there is a point. And if there is no cough, then you give a point. So out of these 4, how many are positive? And we know that group A beta hemolytic streptococcus is common in the age group of 5 to 15 years. So if the child fits into that age group, you again give a point. Okay, here it is 1. So if it is 4 or 5, then there is no doubt. It is straight away group A beta hemolytic streptococcus and we can start treatment. And 1, we can rule out reasonably, exclude bacterial. But if the score is 2 or 3, then it is always very difficult to differentiate whether it is viral or bacterial. For that, we have a rapid test, that is a group A. This is a rapid test we commonly do in the bedside. So this is again a lateral flow immunoassay. So here you see the test line and control line both are positive. If you do the test, we can get the results within 15 to 20 minutes. That side we can decide. So the patients need not come and again to again get the results and meet us for appropriate treatment. So we did a study with RADT and this is our experience. So this is published in a National Medical Journal of India, and we concluded that the sensitivity of RADT is nearly 90%, the specificity of nearly 99%. So all of us should be trying to use that RADT with good results. So this is one more child. This is a 5-year-old child with bilateral tonsillar exudates, and the tonsils are so enlarged it is touching the midline, nearly touching the midline. This child was seen with fever of 3 days with mouth breathing and snoring. So we make a probable diagnosis of infectious mononucleosis by EBV, but still, how can we confirm it? So just order a peripheral smear. If you are able to look at the atypical lymphocyte, then your diagnosis is confirmed. You need not again order for a so much highly sophisticated test. Okay, so this again confirms the diagnosis. So one more child. So this is a dense adherent membrane. Okay, so it is extending beyond the tonsillar fosses. So what could be the diagnosis? Dense white, grayish white membrane. So this is diphtheria. Nowadays, PCR is easily available. So if you order the test morning, evening, you will get the results. So here, this is how we get the results. So here it is positive for RPO Bigens, Clostridium diphtheria, Corynebacterium diphtheria, and the toxin production is also positive. So this confirms a diagnosis of toxigenic diphtheria. So this is how we can easily arrive at the diagnosis if it is a pharyngotonsillitis. So now we will move on to respiratory scenarios. Okay, so how we can syndromic approach. So here, this is a 5-year-old child immunized till date, admitted with fever, cough, tachypnea for 3 days. Saturation is maintaining in room here with mild subcostal and lower costal interactions. So feeding well. So this technically fits with moderate pneumonia. So currently, what are the tests we are doing for COVID-19? It can be rapid antigen test, or it may be a cartridge-based nucleic acid, that is a CBNAT, or it can be TrueNAT or RT-PCR testing. So if it is a rapid antigen testing, we can get the results within 15 to 20 minutes. If it is CBNAT or TrueNAT, we will get the results in 2 to 3 hours time. RT-PCR, it takes a 1 day, depending on where we are ordering the test. So role of antigen testing. So if the pandemic is ongoing, if you are seeing a lot of children with COVID-19, then your pretest probability is high. Then you can order for a rapid antigen test for COVID-19. If it is positive, then it is definitely positive. But it has a drawback. If the test is negative, then we have to see if the child is symptomatic, then we have to order for an RT-PCR, surely to know whether it is COVID-19 or not. On the other hand, our antigen testing is negative and the child is asymptomatic, then we can wait. We can follow up the child. If the child develops symptoms, or if the child has any contact, then we can do an RT-PCR. So this is how we have to interpret the rapid antigen testing. So if this is a child had severe respiratory distress requiring PICU stay. This is a 3-year-old child with respiratory distress requiring PICU stay. X-ray is a dirty lung appearance, bilateral perihilar infiltrates, right more than left. And there is some segmental atelectasis also. So here we are not able to find the exact etiology. Here comes the help of FilmArray respiratory panel. So this is an automated PCR. Here just we have to load the sample. We'll get the results within 1 hour. So simultaneous testing of 20 or more common pathogen. Turnaround time is only 1 hour, and it has an excellent sensitivity and specificity of 95 and 99%. But the main problem again here is always any respiratory viruses, including mycoplasma, they stays in the throat for a quite long time. So always correlate the clinical condition with the results. So this is how this multiplex PCR, all the viruses, so common viruses, this is a non-coronaviruses, non-SARS-CoV-2. So the other coronaviruses which can cause upper respiratory infections. Adenoviruses is covered, entero, flu is covered, and this is the common H1N1 what we are seeing. Parainfluenza is covered, and bacteria, it is chlamydia, pertussis, mycoplasma, these are all covered in multiplex PCR. So this is a report. So we have a other coronavirus OC43 detected and human rhinoenterovirus detected. So this test is done by a biofilm FilmArray. This is a multiplex PCR platform. So this is a company name. So this is how we can differentiate what it is. And based on this, this mainly helps in one is isolation. So if it is an RSV, we have to isolate the child. So helps in isolation. The other thing is if the child is deteriorating, there is no point in keep on escalating the antibiotics. So this is the main use of this BioFire respiratory FilmArray. So other commonly applied test in respiratory system is, so here you have a 2-month-old child admitted with bronchiolitis. Chest X-ray shows right upper lobe homogeneous consolidation with some evidence of atelectasis. Most likely RSV, but still we were in a dilemma whether to start antibiotics or not. If you order an RSV antigen and if it comes as positive, we may not start antibiotic. We have to monitor the child in the hospital. So this is a main example. So mainly to know what it is, and we need not unnecessarily start on high-end antibiotics. This is the main advantage of doing this RSV antigen detection. Likewise, pneumococcal antigen detection. So this pneumococcal antigen testing can be done in any sterile body fluids like CSF we can order, pleural fluid we can do, pericardial fluid we can do, and if it is positive, the chance of this being pneumococcus is very, very likely, and we can target appropriately. So other test commonly which is being done is Mycoplasma IgM, but doing Mycoplasma IgM will not establish a diagnosis of Mycoplasma since IgM will be persisting in the blood for more than 6 months. So diagnosing based only on Mycoplasma is not sufficient. And if you think strongly Mycoplasma, we have to order a PCR also. If PCR is positive, along with IgM is positive, then it is probable Mycoplasma. That's how we have to use the rapid test. So one more example is 13-year-old adolescent boy was evaluated for fever, weight loss, occasional cough, 2 weeks duration. So you are ordering a chest X-ray since because there is occasional cough, and you see surprised with the cavitary lesion on the left side. So you get the GeneXpert result. So if the GeneXpert is positive, it is unequivocally proven TB. So here, if you look at the specificity is very good. Okay, so all the tissue samples, they have an excellent sensitivity and specificity. Lymph node, it is 84% sensitive, specificity 92%, CSF 80, 98% specific, gastric aspirate, again, gastric aspirate, 83% sensitive, specificity is very good. Any tissue sample, they have a sensitivity of 80% and specificity of 98%. On the other hand, pleural fluid has a sensitivity of only 40% and the specificity is good. So any tissue sample, we can order for a GeneXpert. So respiratory diseases are over. So come to tropical diseases, what we commonly see. First case scenario, 9-year-old child with a fever of 8 days duration with headache and occasional vomiting. Examination, the child is febrile, has a moderate episplenomegaly. These are the counts, totally normal. 4,300 with neutrophil 71%, eosinophil 0, platelets 1.7 lakhs, malarial smell is negative. So here you make a probable diagnosis of query-enteric or query-viral or query-scrub typhus. So what are the tests it can be done? So if you are in if the child is very stable, we can straight away order for a gold standard for typhoid, that is a blood culture. If blood culture we are not able to do, what is the disadvantage of doing rapid test in typhoid? So most common mistake we do is ordering Vidal. So Vidal is a highly non-specific test. India is endemic. So whatever test you do, say the test is around 1 in 160, we cannot take as a truly positive test. So if it is a very high value, for example, O1H titers more than 1 in 320, more than 1 in 640, then it may be taken as significant. That also it has to be correlated around the clinical scenario. And mind you, any serological test, that is an antibody-based test, we have to order only after 5 days. So we have to give time for the antibodies to form. Antigen-based test we can do. For example, if you order an NS1, that is an antigen-specific test. So antigen-specific test you can do from day 1 of illness. On the other hand, if you're ordering for an antibody-based test, it has to be always done after day 5 of illness. So Vidal should be ordered after the first week. So usually after 10 days only we'll order. Antibody testing should be done only after 6 to 8 days of fever. False positive results in endemic area. This is a main drawback of Vidal. What about typhoid.IgM? So typhoid.IgM, again, it measures the antibody to the lipopolysaccharide O antigen that is in the cell wall. So there are so many kits available, and the individual kits, they vary in sensitivity and specificity. It varies from 80 to 90%, and it varies from kit to kit. So as we already discussed, any antibody test should be done after 5 days. So it has to be done after 5 days and knowing the limitation of the test. If you have the capacity to do blood culture, then that is the gold standard to confirm the diagnosis of typhoid. So next case scenario, this is a 2-month-old child admitted with fever, lethargy, seizures for 2 days duration. On examination, the child is encephalopathy, has moderate hepatosplenomegaly. So clinical diagnosis of meningoencephalitis was made. Since it's a 2-month-old infant, the infant was started on meropenem and vancomycin. So blood count shows leukocytosis, the counts are 22,200 with thrombocytopenia, platelets 90,000. So here you have a child with meningoencephalitis with leukocytosis. So CSF analysis proceeded with the CSF analysis. So pleocytosis cells were around 400 with the lymphocyte predominant, low normal sugar, slightly elevated protein. So this is suggestive of meningitis. Gram stain negative, cultures are awaited. So since the child has encephalitis also, multiplex PCR was sent, which was also negative. So HSV is reasonably ruled out. So the next day while cleaning, we found a small SR. So this is unequivocal evidence of scrap typhus. So scrap typhus, but SR need not be present in all the cases of scrap typhus. SR is present only in 40 to 60% of the cases. So nowadays they say any tropical, any area which is endemic for scrap typhus, if you see a child with meningoencephalitis and the child has hepatosplenomegaly and thrombocytopenia, always think of scrap typhus. You need not have SR in all the cases. So how to confirm the diagnosis of scrap typhus? Scrap typhus, we have no gold standard test. It is not culturable. So we have to depend on serological test. So we have both RDT and ELISA. ELISA is not technically a point of care testing. So it is done in the laboratory. So it is not truly taken as a point of care testing. And nowadays there are recently RDT kits which are detecting this IgM antibodies. They are going to come, but they are quoting an excellent sensitivity and specificity, 92 to 94% sensitive. Specificity is reasonably good with 92%. Only disadvantage is some 8% they have false positivity to other tropical diseases, including dengue, leptospirosis, and other rickettsial infections like spotted fever because of the non-specific binding of pentavalent IgM. So always this caveat we have to remember while interpreting the results. So the next case scenario, 3-year-old male child, fever of 4 days duration with vomiting. On examination, you found a moderate splenomegaly with mild hepatomegaly. So probable diagnosis of malaria. So you are ordering a peripheral thick and thin smear which picks up the malaria falciparum ring. But some places microscopy is not available. So the one area where RDT has made a significant change is malaria. So apart from the thick and thin smear, the other tests which are available is MPQBC. QBC is quantitative buffy coat analysis. Here also it is technically difficult. We need a fluorescent microscopy and the observer should be competent enough to look into the fluorescent microscopy. So even though it is a very good test, it depends on who is doing the test and where it is being done. So this is very important. So the RDT, now WHO has approved the use of RDT in whenever there is a suspicion of malaria, if microscopy is not possible. So if microscopy is done possible, then first line is microscopy. If it is positive, it confirms the diagnosis of malaria. If it is negative, go for a repeat smear and PF, that is plasmodium rapid antigen test for malaria. So here you have a so this is how it looks like. So this is PF is a HRP2 targeted. The antigen is histidine-rich protein 2. Pan-malarial antigen. So this pan-malarial antigen, it targets the plasmodium, that is pan-LDH or pan-aldolase. So this is targeted. Here HRP2 is targeted. So this is a control line. You get a test line only here, then it confirms the diagnosis of Plasmodium falciparum. If you get a line only here, it is non-falciparum, but it is not able to differentiate whether it is a vivax or other malarial species. So you can say other than falciparum, some other species of malaria is causing the problem. In India, it is more commonly vivax, so you can take probable vivax malaria. If 2 lines are positive, then it is a mixed infection. Then you treat like falciparum infection. So the main utility of RDTs in malaria. So most of the cases occur in area with limited healthcare resources. So the field-based point-of-care testing malaria diagnostics with 90% specificity and specificity of 92% estimated to have saved 2.2 million lives. So WHO is strongly advocating the use of RDT in the diagnosis of malaria. So like malaria, we should have point-of-care testing for all the tropical diseases, then it will be very useful. And the last topical diseases, last case, here you have a 4-year-old child, fever of 6 days duration, vomiting, abdominal pain for 2 days, on examination, fleshed extremities, hemodynamically stable, there is a tender hepatomegaly. So you make a clinical diagnosis of dengue. So here most of the time, here it is very typical, but what we see normally in day-to-day practice is 5 days fever with hepatomegaly. We have a confusion whether it is enteric or dengue, and whether to start antibiotic or wait and watch. In that scenario, if you order an NS1, it is going to come in 2 hours time. If the NS1 is positive, then we are very sure. NS1 is an antigen-based, non-structural protein. So it is an antigen-based test. So it is positive from day 1 of illness. In fact, it can be positive even up to 10 to 17 days, they say. But the sensitivity decreases after 1 week. So usually first 5 days, we can order for an NS1. And this IgM gradually starts, and the limit of reduction reaches a peak by after any antibody test we know. It should be ordered after 5 days of illness. So after 5 days, if you want to confirm, then you order an IgM-based test. So this is how we need to correctly apply the RBTs in clinical practice. So this is about tropical diseases. Coming to meningoencephalitis panel, this is an 11-month-old infant admitted for atypical febrile seizures. This infant had 3 episodes of seizures within a day. On examination, the infant is febrile, drowsy with low GCS. GCS is only 10/50. CBC is normal. So because the meningoencephalitis again started on ceftriaxone, vancomycin, and acyclovir. CSF analysis suggests of aseptic meningitis. Sugar protein reasonably okay. Only WBCs are only pleocytosis, 360 cells with lymphocytic predominant. Gram stain, no organism, culture, no growth. So we know it is aseptic meningitis. What is the protocol for aseptic meningitis? Usually we give ceftriaxone for 5 to 7 days. Here, if you order a ME panel, it is positive for HHV6. So MRI brain with contrast, diffusion restriction, hyperintense lesion in the hippocampus consistent with HSV6. So we are able to stop antibiotics, seizures got control, fever settled, and we are able to discharge on day 3, day 4. This is how we have to use this ME panel. So GE panel coming to 9-month-old infant, chronic diarrhea for 3 weeks duration. On examination, child has minimal NSRK. Albumin is low, albumin is around 3.8. So this child received multiple antibiotics for diarrhea. So we did an immunodeficiency workup, which was negative. So we made a clinical diagnosis of protein-losing enteropathy, varicose. Since this infant received multiple antibiotics outside, we make a possible diagnosis of Clostridium difficile infection. So Clostridium difficile toxin, assay A and B is positive, and GDH is also positive, which confirms the diagnosis of Clostridium difficile infection. And this child responded very well to metrogel, edema subsided, loose stools decreased, and Centrum. So probably here, the whatever started as viral had a co-infection. This Clostridium difficile infection was super added because of multiple antibiotic abuse. And once we correctly treated, everything settles down. So other commonly antigen-based test in the gastrointestinal system is rotaviral antigen. So we may not do rotaviral in all the simple AWD cases. The hydration is okay. We are not going to do anything. There is no point in doing this rotaviral antigen test. Suppose the child got admitted because of dehydration. If it is an young infant, you had a dilemma whether to start antibiotics. Suppose we are admitting a 2-month-old child with diarrhea. So whether to start antibiotics or not, fever may be there. So to differentiate, if you do a rotaviral antigen testing, if it is positive, then you need not start an antibiotic. So mainly for to confirm the diagnosis and to react accordingly. So this rotaviral antigen may be useful in some cases. So this is the last case scenario. How like antibiotics we can adjust based on the rapid test. So here we have a 12-year-old adolescent boy. This boy was on treatment for IBD with azathioprine, and a possible drug-induced pancytopenia he developed. Because during this pancytopenia, he developed a new onset fever spikes. So he was started on meropenem after taking blood culture. So blood culture grew Enterobacter cloacae, but it was resistant to meropenem. So how to adjust your antibiotics? Then we did a CARBA-R test. So CARBA-R is it is a molecular diagnostic test which can detect the carbapenem resistant genes. Here it is NDM, that is New Delhi metallobeta lactamases is detected. So we can start on ceftazidime avibactam plus aztreonam, which is going to completely clear off the bacteremia. This is how we have to apply this CARBAR test. So conclusion. So judicious use of RDT, when to order antigen-based test, when to order antibody-based test, and when we can do the gold standard test, when to do the rapid test, we should have a clear idea. And we have to know the sensitivity and specificity of each test before ordering the test. So it plays a critical role in diagnosis, treatment, prevention of infectious diseases. Simple, accurate, multiplex, and widely available point of care testing are needed for many major pathogens. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhanalakshmi. I think that was a clear overview of rapid diagnostic tests, when to use and how to use it in clinical situations. We can take some questions from the chat box.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, 1 minute. Let me see, because I had to log out in between. So once malaria is diagnosed, how long RDT can be positive, or when it is considered as false positive?
Usually they say HRP2 based tests are positive for a long time. It can be positive for 10 to 14 days also. On the other hand, the Plasmodium LDH based test or aldolase based test, they are positive only for 5 to 7
Okay.
days.
There's one
So,
more
but
question.
usually for follow-up, this rapid diagnostic test should be used.
Okay. One more question. Are there false positive RT-PCR tests for COVID-19?
False positive.
I don't think so.
It's very difficult to say.
False negative can be there, but false
Yeah,
positive.
false positive is
not
very less likely.
Yeah. Then
Unless
one more question. Rapid test for leptospirosis, is it available?
Only IgM based ELISA is available, ma'am. I don't think rapid test
Yeah,
is
I don't think it is available. MAT and MAT is more, gold standard is MAT. Dengue NS1 antigen test, which is ideal? Rapid antigen test or ELISA?
ELISA based test always scores over the rapid antigen test.
Yeah. So, any other questions? Any other questions? Paniraman, can you see anything in the chat box? Because I logged out in between because some call came. Anyone else is able to?
Can CRP help in differentiating viral from bacterial tonsillitis?
Tonsillitis. No, sir. It's a clinical diagnosis.
She said CRP will be positive in adenovirus. Yeah.
Once malaria is that is the thing.
That already I asked.
Yes, madam.
Anything before that you can ask, or any other person who's interested in asking can unmute and ask, because madam, we have another.
Rapid strep test. How to differentiate is the problem is viral or it is a carrier state?
See, once a symptomatic only we are going to order, no? That's why always if you suspect group A beta hemolytic streptococcus only, we need to order the test. If you don't suspect pharyngitis, you order a test, you pick up a gas in the, if RADT comes as positive, then it is mostly an asymptomatic carrier state. That's why if the child has symptoms of pharyngitis, then only you order the test. And you apply the McKissick score also.
Ma'am, I'm Dr. Vindhya here. The false positive RT-PCR for COVID, actually they say that even the dead virus can be positive for a long time. That is why they say that you don't repeat the test.
That is not false positive. That is not false positive. It is positive, but we have to interpret in a clinical
positive,
manner.
Okay? But remains positive for a longer time.
So false positive is when the patient has no virus in the throat and you are picking up. So sometimes the problem with the PCR test is always environmental contamination, and during the procedure, if some reagent or it gets contaminated, then you get a false positive. That is called false positive test.
Okay, but this has led to a lot of problem for us for traveling and all.
Yeah, no.
Because it
don't travel. Don't travel. India, don't travel.
But see, they clearly say beyond 8 days, the virus is not capable of multiplying and there is no chance of transmitting the disease. But if they are still ordering and still they are believing in the results, nobody can do anything.
Travel guidelines should change. They should in fact ask for vaccination certificate or antibody test instead of RT-PCR. I think they should ask for RT-PCR anymore.
Another one question, madam. From
yes,
Dr. Arunachalam. During second wave, nearly 4,000 RT-PCR tests were considered positive, but later it was a mistake from a lab.
Yes, sir.
Any comment on it?
No comments.
Yeah.
That is
It's a very sensitive thing. I don't think we should discuss about that.
No, we cannot comment on that.
I mean, anyhow, it doesn't concern us in any way. Choose a lab which is,
That is
authenticated
because they
first
use the
lab.
CT values which were very high as possible. So that should not be discussed here.
Yes, yes, yes. I think we should not discuss those things. Anything scientific or academic, please ask. Don't ask anything that is political.
Stop sharing. Stop sharing.
The possible time of third wave, there are different views by different people.
Only astrologers can predict that, sir.
Pardon, sir?
Near normal. It's not, sir.
We are already heading towards the third wave, sir.
Can you be no third wave?
I think his voice is breaking.
I think it's breaking then.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
Any
you,
answer,
Dr.
Dr.
Dhananjay. It
Ismail,
was a very
you can,
useful
give
presentation.
some
I think you have covered all the aspects of the rapid diagnostic test, and we are very thankful to you. Thanks,
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Janani, as well for bringing in a very good speaker, and you did justice for your Vasishthar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Yeah, I think someone has got some questions.
Yeah,
Yes?
ma'am, is there any indicators that the third wave is ongoing? You are telling we are heading towards that. Is there any indicators?
Yeah, already Maharashtra seeing a rise and Kerala there's a rise all over the world. So many countries.
Achieve a herd
So
immunity,
unless, yeah, and
50%.
unless all the people around us get vaccinated and we still follow the COVID protocols, I think we are definitely heading towards the third wave. There's no doubt about that.
Yesterday in my hospital, we had 6 positive cases.
That's what I'm saying.
One child was
It is-
admitted, and all the attendants were screened. All the
Entire
attendants were
hospital.
positive.
People
Yes,
have
sir.
forgotten COVID once the lockdown is released.
Everybody has forgotten COVID norms. So I
And
can
most,
see buses
And 75,
overcrowded.
at least
but
75%
people are
have
not
not got
wearing masks.
vaccinated, sir. Vaccination also, we are just finding out from all the parents who come. Most of them, even when they're educated, they have not got vaccinated. They give some reasons for that. They say that we are scared. We just got COVID and I have hypertension. I have cholesterol. Something they say and they don't get
They are
vaccinated.
telling some excuses.
Some excuses, yeah.
Some or other excuses they are telling.
Yes.
Really, ma'am. Ma'am, is it true that the current vaccine does not protect against the Delta variant?
No, sir.
I'm not sure.
So far, they have proven efficacy of around 70 to 80%, sir.
Against Delta variant also.
Yeah,
Yes.
against Delta variant also, there seems to be effective.
And we have had the second wave.
Dr. Janani, I just wanted to ask
Yes.
you one thing about regarding the third dose for
Yes,
the
sir.
doctors. Especially, we
Yes,
all
sir.
had about 8 months back.
Yes, sir.
Should we go for the third dose, or otherwise the government will allow us? Or
So Pfizer is bringing in a booster dose, which is a different one compared to the first and second doses. Totally different vaccine they are producing to cover all the other variants, mutants. But unless it is, really proven, and unless the ICMR and the WHO recommends, I don't think we can't take offhand, I don't think, because when people have not got the first and second doses, still we should not be getting the third dose. We should
So
at
for
least make it
people who are
available
taken
for
COVID,
people.
people who are taken Covishield itself, the first to the second dose, they say maximum it covers for 9 months or so.
Yeah, I think definitely booster will come into place. Studies are going on. They've recently they've just
Sir used to say it
Aussie-
will become like a influenza, sir. Yearly, we may need to take the vaccine.
yeah, every yearly vaccinations
Every year
will
we are
come into
taking for
play.
influenza.
Yes.
Likewise, it may be.
Sir, in UK,
Once- yeah,
I think they are starting in September, third dose, that is a program
Yeah.
for healthcare workers.
yeah, US and UK they're starting
Because there is
sometime
a
in
program with
September.
IAP with the international speakers. I think person from Manchester said they are starting for healthcare workers. September they'll get the booster, but that will be some sort of interchangeable, I believe. Those who got Covishield will get another vaccine, something like that. There's a study
Yeah.
like that.
It's going on, sir. Still
But
not
UK,
clear.
I think they have covered mostly 80 to 85%. The primary vaccination is over, sir.
Yeah, now the booster, they think of healthcare workers now.
Health
For
workers.
healthcare workers.
For healthcare workers. Anyhow, we have to learn to live with COVID, and
Yes.
we'll hope and pray the third wave doesn't hit us as bad as the second wave.
So,
Okay. If
our
there are no
movement
more
should not-
questions,
Our
Yeah.
movement should not be rapid. I think we should be slow.
so avoid physical programs, sir.
Yeah.
Virtual
Till
for
the
year,
end of
no
this
year
year,
virtual.
no. Pandiraman is happy
We
now.
should listen to Pandit Raman. That is what I was also
Yes.
about to tell.
Please
Sir,
avoid
even-
physical
Even
programs.
from Karnataka, they have posted for yesterday, sir.
Yes,
All the
yes, yes,
all the
Friday.
seniors have suggested not to have hold, and so they are also conducting all only.
Let us not create a cluster, sir, please.
True, true, true.
We should, I mean, not
தைரியமா travel
venture
பண்ண
into.
முடியாது சார். தைரியமா travel பண்றது கஷ்டம்.
Till December 2021, I think people have to stay wherever they are. I think we should not plan anything this year.
That's what
If
we
at
said
all
in
small
2020,
programs.
and now it's gone to 2021. Hopefully it'll end there.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. The pandemic,
Last
1918
year
pandemic
also
ended,
was
so yeah, ended in 1920. So this should also end. Let us be
Okay, ma'am.
positive. That's all.
Thank you, all
Thank
of you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
thanks, Dhanalakshmi. It was a
Excellent,
great,
Dana.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you,
Presentation.
thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Dr.
ma'am.
Venkatesh.
Pandiraman
Thank you,
has one
Pandiraman.
final thing.
Thank you,
Pandiraman.
sir.
Sir, one
Thank you,
small
thank you, sir.
comment from
Yeah.
the lecture of Dr. Dhanalakshmi. It has been proven beyond doubt for the practitioners. It is very useful to do. Particularly, UTI is the commonest infection, community-acquired infection in practice. Whenever there is fever without focus, when LE, nitrite, and microscopy all are negative, it rules out almost 100% UTI. So we can use it for ruling out UTI, not for ruling in is culture. For ruling out UTI, you can use this for rapid test for ruling out UTI in day-to-day practice. Just a simple strip test and microscopy, almost UTI is ruled out 100%. So that is a wonderful message for the August audience. Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Dana.
Thank you,
Wonderful,
thank you.
brilliant
Thank you, sir.
presentation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Mainly
Thank
from
you,
India,
Pandiraman.
they are
Thank you,
encouraging the
Ismail.
use of a rapid test.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Judiciously, use it judiciously. That's all.
Everything.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am. Thank you, Ismail,
Thank
sir.
you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.